Sergei Eisenstein is one of the most important filmmakers when it comes to revolutionary filmmaking. He was able to bring film to another qualitative level through his editing techniques, which is what he's most notorious for, the montage theory. By ordinary standards, he's a very important filmmaker. By revolutionary standards, he's crucial to building our film theory. The theory that he built helped pave the path for the vital importance of the edit, as he structured and broke down all the main components of editing in his writings. We will cover the basics of his editing theory in this video, along with his theoretical errors and eventual downfall as an artist later in his career. To us, he's one of the most necessary figures in film history to study, and this video will be one of many to discuss his theory and importance. In Eisenstein's writing, The Film Sense, he stated that there are two problems concerning filmmakers: the method of montage and the content of the shot. Essentially, he's talking about the edit and the image. We have concluded in our theory that the image and the edit are the two necessary components of filmmaking, and in this text, Eisenstein echoes the same token. We state that although both are necessary, the edit holds more power in the dynamic between the two components, as the edit controls the structure, pace, rhythm, and length of the film. The image holds its importance for the audience's immediate emotions, for the display of the subjects that are in discussion, and the other small but important details to find within the frame. To play the counter, without images, we have no film. This is true, certainly, but is what I call a partial truth. Even if we have images, they still need to be put in order, given a narrative importance to the visual story. You can't just capture images willy-nilly and then throw them together and expect a cohesive story. The image is needed, yes, but it's the edit that gives the image its genuine purpose. It dictates what the images mean in context to one another, how they play into one another. For example, take the image of a man. Then cut to children playing outside. Then back to the man as he smiles. This would indicate that the man is happy watching his children play. Perhaps the man is a father. Then we take the image of the children and swap it out for a woman in a bikini. The man, the woman, his smile. Now this man who was a normal father is now depicted as a pervert, a filthy man who watches a woman when they are unaware. This is called the Kuleshov effect, something that Eisenstein learned while in Moscow Film School. It's here where Eisenstein developed his editing theories and learned from Kuleshov the power that the edit has over the audience's perception. It's clear that this school and the professor Lev Kuleshov was a vital figure in this time, as he impacted one of his students to become one of the most important filmmakers ever. Despite his studies, he could not conclude that the edit is in fact more vital than the image. His statements aren't as clear on this matter, as he puts that both are necessary, but doesn't give a clear definition to the relationship at hand. This is a theoretical issue, and I will say now, I have not read all of his writings through, so perhaps it is written somewhere. What I will say now is based on my current knowledge, and I'll continue to cover his 5 main techniques of montage. He went into a fair amount of detail on these components within the edit, and in our view, it is easily the most scientific breakdown of the edit. The first technique is the intellectual montage, the combination or contrast of two complementary or contrasting images displayed in succession. The easier formula for this is 1 + 1 = 3. Yes, I'm bringing math into filmmaking. Here are some examples. Image A, a man yelling. Image B, a lion roaring. This presents an idea of ferociousness, that the man is angry, but also meant to be taken seriously, as lions are dangerous animals. The two images are in separate locations, yet the audience concludes that the man and lion are alike, because that is what they are being shown in order. What if we took this same man and showed something different? Image A, the man yelling. Image B, a little toddler crying. Now we've completely changed the perception of this man. Someone who was once to be feared is now something to mock or not take as seriously, perhaps even an annoyance. Children aren't ferocious nor dangerous like a lion, so the audience now sees the man as silly. Whatever he is angry about can be equivalent to a child having a temper tantrum. The edit has completely dictated how these images are seen. It has controlled our perception of what exactly these images mean. The intellectual montage combines ideas and allows them to work together or in contrast, and what comes out as a result is often dependent on the audience's perception. The filmmaker must know what the audience is thinking, and then play out these thoughts and emotions within their story to draw the audience further into the visual narrative. Audiences love this kind of editing, as it often encourages comedy and thought-provoking comparisons between two subjects that aren't normally compared with one another. Unlike intellectual montage, where two images are often contrasted to create a third meaning, tonal montage is when multiple images are combined to complement one main theme. The formula I have for this technique is 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It's much more straightforward. All three images add together to merge into an overarching theme. They all add up to have similar qualities that align and add into a theme presented to the audience. The images add up together for the audience to conclude certain information about what has happened. Every image adds into the next. When building a theme, it's crucial to know how the audience will add them to their understanding of the story. With the use of the edit, we can determine what information the audience receives and how they will perceive this information. Next is something more direct, the metric montage. This form of montage is based on the length of the image, the duration of its life within the film, how many frames or seconds it lasts. So say you cut a sequence purely based on metrics. Every shot lasts 3 seconds, for example. No matter what happens in the frame, you cut in 3 seconds. This will build a clear, concise rhythm with the audience as they begin to expect the cut, as they visually recognize the pattern as the film goes on. In the perspective of the whole sequence, this would be measured in shots per second, or SPS. Let's use an example. This sequence, we have 10 shots, and the runtime is 30 seconds. So the SPS is 3. This is a very basic template for building rhythm. It differs from the fourth technique, which is called rhythmic editing, which is when the images are cut based on the motion on screen or the audio presented with the image. So if we are looking at someone's eyes and they shift to the right, we cut to a door. In conclusion, the person is looking at the door, or perhaps waiting for it to open, or they will walk up to it soon. Or cutting with audio as the deciding factor. You show a bored student. When we hear a bell ringing, we see a clock strike a specific time. The sound carries over and the student leaves their seat. We conclude for that this class is over, and the sound of the bell gives the universal understanding that class is done and the student is allowed to leave. When intellectual montage, tonal montage, rhythmic, and metric montage techniques are all used at once, Eisenstein defined it as overtonal montage, the highest form of editing. When including all techniques of editing rhythm, duration, order, and continuity, then you have more control over what exactly the audience is perceiving. This makes sense, of course. The more you utilize a tool, the more you get out of it, and then the higher the quality of the final product you receive. This is why understanding these components is so necessary, as your skills as a filmmaker will increase drastically with your comprehension and practice of them. I will say that there are some theoretical flaws with Eisenstein's definitions and explanations of editing, and we will explore this argument later. A great example of overtonal montage can be found in the film Battleship Potemkin, specifically in the Odessa step sequence. Battleship Potemkin is a silent film released in 1925 about the 1905 revolution in Russia. It displays the conditions of the Navy men in the Russian army by the port of Odessa, along with the people of Odessa who are protesting. The step sequence is the dramatic display of Bloody Sunday, where several hundred Russian workers were injured and killed, and another few thousand were arrested by the Imperial Guard. This event led to the 1905 revolution, and this event is the catalyst for the revolution to start. The film ends with a struggle and a triumph of the Navy troops as they rebel against their officers, and the workers rejoice as they are not fired upon by the Navy ships. The key displays of this editing masterclass start with the sailors in the port, receiving supplies from the town as all people in the city wave them goodbye. A very simple sequence to show the positive relationship between the citizens and the sailors. Then suddenly, we go from happy kids clapping to a mix of jump cuts of a woman jolting around. We see the man with no legs hobble off screen. A woman with an umbrella runs to the screen as the umbrella fills the frame. Eisenstein interrupts the pattern he established prior, and he tells the audience with this jump cut transition that there's a change all of a sudden. The people who were still in the frame, happy, now run around frantically. Something is wrong. We continue to see people run down the stairs at various angles, seeing different characters. We see a wide of a flock of people running down the stairs, and a group of guards with rifles chasing them down. We see a man get shot, his POV falling down. Then we see him hit the ground, and a kid runs to his side. We go from wide shots of people running to close-ups of shots of people hiding behind some of the steps. This begins to develop the intimacy with the people as we see their frightened faces, contrasted with being shown the guards' backs, as we do not get to empathize with them. Emerging from the crowd is a mother with her young son. We watch them run down the steps, then cut to the rifles being shot as smoke comes from the hammer of the gun. The son falls and the mother keeps running. We cut to a close-up of the kid, bloody and screaming. The mother turns and sees her child pass out. She's in anguish as we cut between her eyes bulging out of her head, the kid being stepped on, and the crowd swarming the steps. The mother comes back, in horror, picking up her dead son off the steps, eyes still bulging out of her head. The mother now carries her dead son up the steps. The guards continue to march down as the mother proceeds up. A clear idea of conflict presented by the two subjects as they are on opposite sides of the screen, headed towards one another. To make a long story short, the woman eventually dies and the other woman gets shot. Now let's go to the most famous part of the scene. A woman holds her baby in a carriage, in terror as the guards march down the steps. The mother is scared. The baby's crying. The guards march down the steps. They fire. The woman is in agony. The carriage moves slightly. The woman tilts forward. We see her grab her belt. We cut to the wide of people fleeing down the stairs. There are guards at the bottom, slaughtering them. The woman is grabbing her stomach as she is bleeding. We watch her fall down and die. The baby crying in the background behind her. The guards continue to march down as the mother falls. We watch her fall back and push the carriage down the stairs, and it goes down with the other people still running, as wounded bodies fill the stairs. We see the people flee, the mother die, the carriage continue to go down. As the baby goes down, the woman who is approaching the guards watches in shock. We see a close-up of the carriage going down, then cut to a crowd of the people trying to scramble for safety. The baby continues down. A man watches intensely. Then a guard yells and slashes his sword across the camera. We cut to the woman watching, whose face is now slashed. We fade to black and see cannons turning, then cut to them pointed directly at us. We see the statues of Odessa Theater. The cannons fire. We see the three statues in quick succession. Then multiple angles of a gate collapsing. Then, to end the scene, a statue of a lion sleeping, then startled, then the lion has fully risen. We watch the gate collapse to the ground, and the scene is over. This entire scene is orchestrated to make the audience sympathize with the victims of Bloody Sunday. Watching children be killed, mothers shot, old women beaten, dead bodies pile up. All these elements of a massacre help build a case for the guards and Russian government as bad or unjust. In a silent film, you cannot rely on dialogue for information as to what is happening, and Eisenstein utilized the close-up in this sequence more than any other to really bring detail and intensity to the matter. Along with showing brutal violence, he has made the audience sympathize with the victims over the government. This was accomplished through the editing of the scene. The ability to dictate where the audience is looking is crucial when displaying a tragedy. Eisenstein chose to show all these things unfold in order to build the proper emotions of fear and concern to then anger and frustration. The rapid cutting pace of the ending gives the scene the necessary intensity to build up to the climax of the ship firing on the city. These images are very important, but they serve a very small purpose if they aren't put in the necessary order to build the narrative. If they aren't given the right timing and position in the film, it will not match the continuity, and the whole sequence will be a bit awkward because of it. This is without doubt a political film, and it's public knowledge that Eisenstein supported Marxism and the revolution that took place in 1917. The framing of this event in history is definitely something the artist needs to consider when planning their project, or any political project for that matter. This film is about the start of a workers' revolution, so it's important to have the audience side with the working class and not the government. This goes in hand with your political perspective as well. However, since most artists aren't efficient when it comes to having a consistent political perspective, that's something to consider handling in your personal time. Eisenstein does a brilliant job depicting the sailors' conditions as uncomfortable and poor, along with creating a clear separation between them and their officers that will be revisited in the film later. Of course, the step sequence establishes the government as rotten, and we don't even get a chance to understand the guards outside of their actions. We don't explore the complex emotions some of the guards may feel when killing innocent women and children. We focus solely on the fact of what they are doing. This doesn't give the audience a chance to relate to the guards, and frankly, they really shouldn't need to, as most people won't find themselves in a position where they want to gun down innocent people. This frames the argument of supporting the people over the government instead of vice versa, or even worse, taking a neutral stance on the matter. When communicating your political perspective in art, you must be clear in your own understanding of the events you are covering and discussing. Say, for example, the current genocide taking place against Palestinians in Israel is something you could make a film about. You need to hold a perspective, though. Whether it's pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, pro-working class, whatever it is. If you find yourself as one of those people who can't take sides in political arguments, who often doesn't know what's going on, basically ignorant to the issues at hand, I suggest you stay away from political filmmaking. But if you want to be a revolutionary filmmaker, a filmmaker that makes films that reflect the current state of the world, being politically sharp is absolutely necessary. Having a perspective that is consistent and you yourself understand and can communicate to others is crucial if you want to make a film that communicates your political ideas. There's no place for ignorance when it comes to revolutionary filmmaking. If you don't know something, find out about it and gain knowledge about the subject, especially if it's political. There will be a video coming out later that goes over this channel's political and artistic philosophy in depth, discussing how he tackles social issues and why it's important for us to do so. Back to Eisenstein, his use of editing lifted filmmaking to a new qualitative level. His understanding of how to utilize the edit was almost perfect, but there were a few flaws in this film theory. To start, he did not see the need to break from theater and literature. In fact, he saw it as a normal process. He stated in his writings about directing film that theater helped depict reality in a more natural way. He went on in other writings about how necessary actors are to communicate what is occurring in a scene so the audience can comprehend the story. To me, theater is not natural by definition. It's a performance art that can be seen and heard by an audience. Theater cannot recreate reality. No art can, nor should this be the goal of an artwork. Rather, the goal should be to make the audience reflect on their own reality and lives. In order to get the audience to do this, we ought to show them something that resembles reality, but not something that is trying to recreate it. Realism is boring. People want art that stands out from real life, but they can still read into it and learn from it because it's like real life. In filmmaking, if we want something that resembles real life, shouldn't we film real life? We are already chopping up reality and restructuring it to fit our artistic vision. Why does theater need to be brought into this matter? Theater was brought into film in order for films to be produced at a high rate with relative ease in the early 1900s. Genres were quickly established. Westerns, dramas, and comedies were the most popular, arguably. With the concept of the genre, the studios were able to predict their audience size, hence the ticket sales they would make from a production. Films were seen as an investment by businessmen. And guess what? They still are. Films are still confined to theater because it helps tremendously with predicting the audience size of a film, which is why blockbusters and franchises have become so popular. It's easy to predict a profit, and the effort to come up with new ideas is below the ground. One of Eisenstein's key failures was his ability to separate from theater, along with his defense of theatrical filmmaking. The mix of film and theater is not natural and was done in the name of profit, not in the name of creativity. This is something that differs between Eisenstein and Vertov, as Vertov was a proponent of separating from theater and saw it as a natural progression of filmmaking. He is somebody who we'll make a video on very soon. After Eisenstein's rise to prominence in the 20s, he left Russia to go to Mexico in the next decade. He would return to Russia prior to World War II and began making films for the Stalin-ran government. There's no doubt that Stalin's rules in Russia harmed several artists in the country, Eisenstein included. He didn't have much success when he left the country, as people did not want to give money to someone who was a self-proclaimed communist. He was able to make some films in Mexico, but they probably weren't up to the qualitative level he wanted, which led him back to Russia, which was really the only place he could get funding for his films. The problem was that there was a decent amount of censorship in USSR's film industry, and you essentially had to make pro-state films. A lot of Eisenstein's projects couldn't be made as they were either too progressive or somehow didn't align with the USSR's agenda of maintaining Stalin's rule. During this period of him back in Russia, the quality of his films took a massive hit. His montage techniques fell to the wayside, and his films became more in favor of portraying a pretty picture rather than a riveting visual sequence. His most famous film in this period are his Ivan the Terrible films, Part 1 and 2. They are now seen as his critique of Stalin at the time. When you watch these films, it's like a completely different filmmaker made them. The image is completely dominant over the edit, as the edit is mainly used as a way to progress the plot along, rather than an intricate way to tell the story. His failure to separate from theater certainly plays a role in his artistic ability declining in the second half of his career. He clearly took a favor for the composition of the image, rather than the controlling nature of the edit. The element of Stalinism and being blacklisted in the rest of the world as a communist probably had some effect on him losing the ability or confidence in his montage techniques. Nonetheless, there's a clear quality drop-off as he took the position of the image being greater than the edit. This theory plays into theater being intertwined with filmmaking. But despite all these failures that I've just listed, we still see him as a crucial figure to revolutionary filmmaking, given his initial attempt to bring editing to a science. Our last video pointed out we must treat filmmaking as a scientific production. We must be engineers when constructing our vision. It's vital we understand the role of the edit and the need to separate from theater in order to make revolutionary films. Our goal is to build a theory that fully explores the scientific and social questions that filmmaking contains. We will need help from our community in building this theory, as your voice and opinion will be taken into consideration when you critique or compliment our videos. Not only will we build a theory on revolutionary filmmaking, but we will also be producing revolutionary films. If that's something that interests you, I suggest looking at our Patreon.